Chapter 8. All That's Golden. 2 hours. That was roughly how long the detour to the Carousel Boutique had taken out of Twilight's day. It was 2:30 in the afternoon by now, which left plenty of time to spend on the pursuit of employment. And even if that particular task wasn't achieved this day, at least Twilight could walk away knowing that she had grown the small social circle she had managed to amass in this town, which itself was some kind of victory, considering her plans for settling down here. Rarity seemed like a kind and well-balanced individual, and a possible way to check on just how much Canterlot had changed during her absence.
Well, that was fun,
Pinkie Pie beamed, trotting along beside Twilight's casual stroll as the two re-emerged into the bustling country town.
So, what's next? I still need to find a job.
Twilight gave a deep exhale after the reply. It wasn't something she wanted to have to do, but it still needed to be done, and as quickly as possible. Especially since she spent some precious money on what was effectively a fashion statement. Not the greatest financial decision when one has no source of income.
Still not sure what I'm gonna do about that, though. Fluttershy hopefully won't mind another night. If it has to come to that.
The thought wasn't exactly encouraging, but at least there was the possibility of having a roof over her head for the recent future. There was some breathing room, at the very least. But as the alicorn continued on her way, her progress was halted by a sudden pink pony standing directly in her path.
Oh, I know! Let me help! I can be one of your references!
She looked at Twilight with wide, sparkling eyes, almost uncomfortably close to her, clearly looking forward to her proposal.
It'll be fun! Well, as fun as getting a job can be, anyway.
Skepticism was made plain on Twilight's face as she stared into the almost pleading eyes. The offer was tempting. Having a town resident vouch for her would prove to be beneficial in the search for employment. Yet at the same time, Pinkie definitely seemed like the kind of person who would vouch for anybody if they just asked nicely. And that could make Twilight look as if she were manipulating the mare to make herself look better, which could hurt her chances of getting employment.
And don't even think about saying no,
Pinkie continued after returning Twilight's personal space.
because there's nothing in this world that can stop me from helping a friend. Not even the Queen and her 2 hearts.
Well, that saved Twilight the effort of making the decision at least. Though the dilemma had been exchanged for a rather different one as a result of Pinkie's statement. Twilight's confusion on it could only be allowed to escape her mind in the form of a single word.
What? Alicorns have 2 hearts. I remember hearing that somewhere.
Without another word, Pinkie began trotting off.
Now come on, we gotta find you a job, and I know a good place to start.
Twilight wasn't sure what was stranger. The fact that such a rumor even existed in the first place? The fact that Pinkie flaunted it about like common knowledge? Or the fact that she didn't know for sure if she had 2 hearts or not? An urge to place a hoof to her chest had to be actively fought off as she went to follow her, the vague bit of information rattling about in her head. What if she actually did have 2 hearts? How would she know without actively checking? It wasn't exactly something one would think about on a regular basis. And if that rumor were true, there wouldn't have been much need for Twilight to have been told about it. And her mind was on other things when she was transformed into this in the first place, like the wings that had basically burst from her back. Shaking the wayward thought from her head, Twilight elected that there were more important things to worry about. In the end, it didn't really matter if she had 2 hearts or not. The knowledge wouldn't really change anything about her lifestyle, so it wasn't worth looking into. For now, she had to worry about wherever Pinkie was taking her. Out of all the places they could have gone, though, Twilight wasn't expecting to be brought back to Golden Oak's library. Yet here she was, approaching the tree-made building once more alongside Pinkie Pie. Of course, there was one major difference in the library's appearance from how Twilight remembered it. A white sign hanging from a nail in the door bearing 2 words that the young alicorn was very happy to see. Help wanted.
Was that there last time? Nope. Mr. Knox put it up just this morning.
Pinkie responded with glee as she pushed the door open for Twilight.
Which is actually really convenient if you think about it. The only other idea I had was taking you to Sweet Apple Acres to see if Applejack would give you a job bucking trees. But while we were talking with Rarity, I was left with plenty of time to think about it. I figured it probably wouldn't end very well. Applejack would probably say something like, "Picking apples with magic makes them taste bad."
Pinky's words were beginning to blend together, faster and faster until they were almost illegible.
And then you'd go and actually prove that somehow against all known laws of science and magic. Then you'd show that you can actually buck trees because you're a world-class adventurer and you've probably super swole underneath that cape. Then Granny Smith would show up and say you couldn't work there because apple bucking is an earth pony thing. She's kind of old-fashioned when it comes to that sort of thing. And then everyone would be super quiet for a hot minute because of the super uncomfortable undertones of racism that would be going on. And then Applejack would start trying to backpedal her granny's statement as to not make the family look bad. And Big Mac would be all like, "Yup," like he always is. And Appleplum would also be there, but I didn't hypothesize what she'd contribute to the conversation. School fillies are basically a different species and thus are entirely unpredictable. But anyway, at some point you just get irritated with the whole thing and just leave to get some peace and quiet. And where do ponies go for peace and quiet?
Pinky gestured towards the shelves of books surrounding them.
The library! And when I thought of that, I remembered the help wanted sign outside. So I decided to cut right to the chase and just bring you here for skipping all the pointless filler.
Twilight had absolutely no idea what Pinky had just said. She had clearly heard the mess of words that had been thrust on her, but they had yet to fully process. And Twilight wasn't even entirely sure if she wanted to understand in the first place. Regardless, she was at least happy to see that there was a job she was actually qualified for, and her potential employer was someone she already knew, which could actually help her case. What wouldn't help her case, however, was what Pinkie Pie was about to do. She was taking in a long and deep breath, craning her head back for dramatic effect. It didn't take Twilight's diploma from the Queen's School for Gifted Unicorns to figure out what Pinky was about to do, and the first occurrence of this action was not one that Twilight wanted to have repeated. As Pinky whipped her head forward to call out for Ponyville's local librarian, she found herself unable to do more than make a few muffled mumbles. In fact, she couldn't even open her mouth, and it felt like something was holding it shut. Naturally alarmed, she crossed her eyes to look at her snout in order to see what was wrong. And to her surprise, she could see a faint magenta-hued aura ensnaring her mouth and holding it shut, one that matched the magical glow currently emanating from Twilight's horn.
Pinky, please don't. We're in a library, and I think my eardrums would burst if you did that again.
Twilight stated plainly, keeping her hold on the pink mare's mouth firm.
I'm going to let you go now, but I need you to promise not to scream. Understand? Mm-hmm.
That was all Pinky could do to respond, aside from a nod. When the seal on her lips was released and the ability to enunciate was returned, she spoke up.
Sorry, old habits die hard.
With that obstacle taken care of for now, the only thing left to do was find the librarian. Though unlike last time, he was not to be found snoozing underneath the desk, as he was last time. So without any further ideas, the only place to go was up the stairs to the second floor. Though that plan had to be put on hold for a little bit, as three blurs rushed down the steps in a cavalcade of hooves clacking against the wooden floor.
Excuse us!
The first blur shouted, her only discernible feature being a big pink bow tied up in her mane.
Sorry about that!
The second dashing filly added, a book levitating close to her in a green aura.
Hi, Pinky!
The final orange-colored pony called out as the trio made their swift leave. The three had only been present for a few short seconds before entirely vanishing, leaving Golden Oaks eerily silent.
What in the world was that?
Twilight glanced over to Pinky for some answer. She was a long-time resident of this town, so surely she would know what in the world that was about.
Oh, that was just Sweetie Belle and her friends.
Pinky answered while squinting heavily at the door.
Sweetie Belle being Rarity's little sister, that is. Oh, small world.
Indeed it is. Mr. Knox chuckled as he slowly made his way down the steps. I figured you'd have moved on by now, adventuring and all that. Here to sell me more books? Twilight groaned and mumbled under her breath at the insinuation.
Not an adventuring but traveler. Nope, she's here looking for a job.
Pinky explained with pride.
And you're looking for an employee.
Is that so? Well, that's a pleasant surprise. The nocturnal pony perked up at that. Truth be told, I wasn't expecting the position to be filled so soon. Or at all, really.
That's sad.
Shaking off the momentary discomfort from being mistitled, Twilight returned to the conversation with a smile.
So, when can I start?
Hold on there, young mare. Nox waved a leathery wing to slow the conversation down. I still need to interview you. Make sure you're right for the job and all that.
All right. Sorry.
All right, well, we'll start with some general information. Where are you from?
Canterlot, and I'm 21 years old if you were going to ask.
Pinky audibly gasped.
You're younger than me? I'm 24!
Pinky, please. Mr. Nox addressed firmly. This is kind of important.
Oh, right. Job interview.
Pinky flushed a bright shade of red as she slowly backed towards the entrance.
I'll just wait outside. Sorry.
And with that, the library was allowed to be silent once more with one last click of the door. Now then, Gentillesse, A lot of great schools up there. Mr. Nox continued as he made his way towards the desk. Taking a seat behind the wooden structure, he placed his foreheads atop its surface and looked back to Twilight. A degree from just about all of them could fetch you quite the nice job in just about any field you were looking for. So where did you get yours? If you have one, that is.
The Queen's School for Gifted Unicorns.
If the Saurosian had a drink, he would have spat it out on the spot. He looked at Twilight with wide, unblinking eyes for what felt like ages as he processed the weight of the words Twilight had just spoken. You went to school there?
Correct. And I have my degree if you want me to prove it.
Twilight knew that this was a reasonable reaction. It was the same one she always got when she mentioned her place of education. At this point, she was just going through the motions. Sifting through her saddlebags with her magical touch, it wasn't long before she withdrew the framed certification of her graduation, signed by the school's headmaster and the Queen of Equestria herself. This one small slip of paper was irrefutable proof of Twilight's claim. The frame had seen better days, a long and thin crack running from one corner to the other diagonally across the glass surface. Nox looked down at the degree that had been placed on his desk for a time, eyes still wide with disbelief at what he was looking at. At some point, he had even removed his glasses and quickly cleaned them just to make sure that his eyes weren't deceiving him. Which they weren't, which somehow still seemed to surprise him. After a few minutes of absolute silence, he finally returned his attention back to Twilight. You have a degree from the most renowned school in the country, and you're a homeless traveler who wants to be a librarian in a nothing country town? The stallion combed through his mane with a hoof as a show of just how baffled he was at Twilight's situation. If you don't mind me asking, why? Well, when it was put that way, it did sound a bit preposterous. Twilight was in a position that many coveted but few actually obtained, and could have used this one piece of paper to set her up for the rest of her life back in Canterlot with just about any career she could ever want. Yet she had chosen the life of a vagrant, traveling the world in search of long dragons with Spike. And there were several reasons as to why she had chosen this path for herself, and it had been a very long time since she had put any substantial thought on any of those reasons. But Mr. Nox had asked the question, and he likely wouldn't be satisfied with anything short of an answer.
I wanted to see the world.
Twilight half lied with a sigh.
You know, experience life outside of books and magic for a while.
The Saurosian narrowed his eyes at the disguised alicorn, reading the minor details in her expression as he mused over the answer. Though just as Twilight was starting to get worried about any further prying, he relaxed his face and leaned back into the chair. Well, asking about your qualifications would be redundant at this point. You've just gotten yourself a job. The nocturnal pony yawned loudly before continuing. How soon can you start?
As soon as you need me to.
Twilight answered instantaneously, using tremendous willpower to stop herself from wildly celebrating right there on the spot. All right then. Be here tomorrow morning at 7 sharp. He pushed himself out of the seat and began walking for the door. There will be some bureaucratic hoops for you to leap through, forms to sign, all of that, but it shouldn't take too long. Nox pushed open the door with a huff, not noticing as Pinkie Pie quickly pulled her ear away from the wooden barricade as he did. We'll go over the exact duties your job entails in the morning. If you think it just involves running this library, I'm sorry to say that isn't quite true. There's a reason I was looking for help after all. As for right now, I have my own hoops to leap through to make this all official, and I'll need to lock up while I'm out. Twilight nodded as she exited the library as asked, choosing to ignore Pinkie's eavesdropping.
Thank you so much, Mr. Knox. You have no idea how much this means to me.
I could say the same to you. The elder pony chuckled as he locked the door behind him. This job can be surprisingly taxing. I'll be seeing you in the morning then, Miss Sparkle. Remember, 7 sharp. Twilight confirmed that she remembered before she and Pinkie said their goodbyes to the nocturnal pony, leaving the two of them alone in front of the Golden Oaks Library.
So you got the job!
Pinkie bellowed and obviously faked surprise.
That's fantastic! Congratulations, Twilight! Now you just need to find a house!
She draped a forelimb over Twilight's shoulders, using its twin to gesture on towards the town.
Come on, I know just where to... Actually, with all due respect, Pinkie, I think I'll need to take a rain check on that one.
Twilight interrupted as she wormed her way out from the unwanted physical contact.
I had other things I needed to take care of. Private things.
Indeed she did. Now that her employment was all but finalized, she needed to get back to Fluttershy's cottage and check up on Spike. She was sure he was fine, but after the week she had had, she didn't want to leave anything to chance.
Oh, I see.
Pinkie spoke dejectedly, taking a few steps back to return her friend's personal space. The disheartened look was quickly discarded in favor of her normal one.
That's fine. Camelot wasn't built in a day after all. See you later.
And with that, she was gone, skipping off back into town with a spring in her step, humming that familiar, catchy tune to herself as she did.
She is something else.
Twilight mused to herself as she made her way back to her current base of operations.
Oh, at least she'll keep things around here lively.
Fluttershy's cabin was just as Twilight had left it. Quaint, quiet, and filled with just about every animal one could find in this region of the world. The only thing that betrayed her memory was the lack of the yellow Pegasus who owned the abode, and the absence of a particular reptilian being who had been left in her care for the day. Of course, Twilight had only just walked in the door, and it was possible that they were simply somewhere else in the wooden home.
Spike?
Twilight asked loud enough for her voice to carry throughout the home, but not loud enough as to be considered a shout. Aside from the various sounds of the animals rummaging around and minding their own business, there was no response.
Fluttershy? Anyone?
Still nothing.
All right, Twilight, don't panic.
The alicorn told herself as she made her way to the stairs.
Spike's probably just taking a nap or something, and Fluttershy likely stepped out to go get something. Nothing to be worried about.
Twilight walked lightly through the home of her host, scanning for any sign of the two she was after. The first stop was, logically, the room she and Spike had been lent, but this led to no meaningful development in the search, much to her frustration. Taking a brief pause to set down her heavy saddlebags, Twilight returned to her quest with much vigilance. And while Spike was her top priority, she was still a guest in this home and didn't wish to overstep any boundaries, keeping her search to rooms with opened doors. Any that had shut doors, she resorted to knocking and asking if anyone was within. There were no answers, aside from the calls of the critters who inhabited this place, but it was still worth a try.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Twilight chanted internally as she continued doing her best to remain calm.
Nothing bad happened. I'd know if something bad happened. I'd feel it.
This did very little to ease her anxieties, but it did keep the external facade alive for a short while longer. It was about now that Twilight recalled Fluttershy mentioning a basement in passing and redirected her search towards the lower end of the house. At least, that was the plan. But upon returning to the ground floor and starting to search for the basement entrance, something rather unusual caught her eye. She couldn't just ignore it. It demanded that she give it some kind of attention. The item in question sat in a rather nice-looking glass display case, the bottom lined by a velvet cushion made to delicately cradle the contents. But held within the glass barricade was just a simple white wooden twig. Likely from some species of birch, if Twilight were to take a guess, but clearly not from any tree around this area. Though the strangest thing wasn't the fact that this seemingly insignificant item had been put proudly on display in such a profound way, the fact that Twilight had seen the small piece of wood before. Yesterday. Sticking out from behind Fluttershy's ear like an accessory.
Okay. So she likes twigs.
Twilight pondered aloud, examining the stick from every possible angle she could without opening the case.
Is anyone in this town normal?
That question would never be answered, as the loud and abrupt crash of a door being flung open interrupted her train of thought. This sound was accompanied by the outcry of a rather upset-sounding bear. Immediately on guard, Twilight turned towards the source just in time to see Harry the bear stomp right past her without a moment's notice, angrily grumbling and growling to himself as he made his way into the backyard. Following close behind, but actually taking the time to stop and acknowledge Twilight, was Spike. The missing dragon was doing his best to walk on only 3 legs. His expression lit up brighter than the sun when he noticed that Twilight was back.
Twilight!
Spike yelled enthusiastically, pushing himself off the ground with a mighty push from one of his good forelimbs directly into Twilight, in an act that could be described as a very haphazard hug.
I just beat a bear 28 times at chess! In a row! It was great! Wait, what?
The prideful claim wasn't lost on Twilight, who was still trying to process exactly what had happened. Angry bear, happy Spike, there was a bit of whiplash.
Spike and Harry spent the day playing chess.
Fluttershy explained quietly as she followed them in.
And he's scarily good at chess.
She sounded almost intimidated by the long dragon's strategical aptitude.
With how much we used to play? It better be.
Twilight kept her own boastful claim to herself as her personal space was restored. Back when the two had lived in Canterlot, there had been many a day where they had passed the time by playing the Game of Kings. And Twilight had taken a great deal of effort to teach Spike exactly how to play the game, just so he could provide some kind of challenge. And it seems the little guy had come a long way from trying to eat the pieces, and that made Twilight proud.
So, how did the job hunt go?
Spike asked enthusiastically, his tail wagging almost uncontrollably behind him. Some things never change, it seems. The dragon's behavior upon being reunited with Twilight being a clear example of that. He never did like spending prolonged periods of time apart from her. He was rather clingy, to put a word to it.
Well, luckily enough, the local library was looking for a set of extra hooves to help out. Oh. So you'll be working with Mr. Knox?
Fluttershy shrank into herself at Twilight's report, shuddering slightly at the mention of the library. The slightest twinge of dread present in her tone, which was immediately noticed by Twilight. She raised a brow towards Fluttershy.
Is something wrong with that? Oh, no, not at all.
The yellow pony practically panicked, waving a hoof rapidly in the air as if to dismiss her own claim.
I didn't mean it like that. He's a perfectly fine stallion. I pet sit his cat a lot of the time. It's just...
Fluttershy shivered again at the thought.
He's a little... odd.
Who's Mr. Knox? Spike asked blankly, currently feeling rather lost in the conversation. Twilight ignored his query, more focused on Fluttershy's statement.
Odd how? It's nothing really.
Fluttershy deflected while making her way towards the kitchen.
I can just be a bit paranoid at times. I'm sure you've noticed.
Well, Twilight couldn't argue with that. Fluttershy was one bad day away from the grandmere of psychological meltdowns based on what she knew about her. She exhibited all the signs of a socially awkward introvert who wasn't exactly the best in any given social situation. In fact, if it weren't for Spike's injury, Twilight was certain that the mayor would have never welcomed Twilight into her home. In fact, Twilight knew for a fact that the two would have never even met if not for that injury. But even still, her reaction to just the implication of Ponyville's resident Sarosian was a bit much. It was more than simple paranoia. There had to be a reason for this behavior. But continuing to push the issue clearly wasn't the way in which to find the answers.
Were you able to find a place to stay?
Fluttershy changed the topic, stopping at the threshold of the kitchen to face Twilight.
Or did you want to stay another night? If it isn't too much trouble.
Twilight did well in hiding her current suspicions while speaking.
Pinkie offered to help me with house hunting tomorrow. Oh, all right then. Well, the guest room is still yours to use, for however long you need it.
It took a moment, but the nervous look that Fluttershy wore was soon overtaken by her small but kind smile.
If you need anything else, I'll be out back trying to calm Harry down.